So in today's devotion, especially if you're following these kind of sequentially in order, we've had a couple weeks off. There was the National Youth Gathering, and then there was VBS, and then, frankly, I took a week to recover. So we're back, and we kind of had a natural stopping point when we last were doing these daily devotions. And we finished off the small catechism. We're going through the Book of Concord. We're working our way through it, and we're getting close to the end ish. Okay, there are two more sections. The first is the Large Catechism, and we're going to go through the Large Catechism, but some of the stuff is going to maybe sound a little familiar to you if you've been watching these devotions consistently, and that's because the Large Catechism, in a lot of ways, is an expansion on the Small Catechism. So if some of this stuff you're like, that sounds familiar, that rings a bell, that might be why. There's a lot of very similar material, obviously, but the Large Catechism goes in a little deeper. And that's what we're going to be starting with today. And then next, we have, next and last, we have the Formula of Concord, which is the last kind of document within the Book of Concord. And then then there's a biographical index and a subject index, but we're not going to go through that because that's almost purely organizational. So diving into the Large Catechism then, the first part of the Large Catechism is the 10 Commandments, and it dives pretty deep into what these different commandments mean. And the first commandment is, you are to have no other gods. Okay? And I think most of us at this point, and I could be wrong, so I'm going to explain it anyway, but most of us understand that having other gods doesn't just necessarily mean following other religions. And there are actually a couple examples that are included in this explanation that I want to share with you guys. First, he says, a god is a term for that to which we look to for all good and in which we find refuge in all need. Okay? And I think that's maybe a little bit different than we typically think about it, but there are a lot of things that can fall into this category. One of the examples that he uses are, and I'm reading here, there are some who think that they have God and everything they need when they have money and property. They trust in them and boast in them so stubbornly and securely that they care for no one else. They too have a God, Mammon by name, that is money and property, on which they have set their whole heart. This is the most common idol on earth. There's kind of the popular saying, money is the root of all evil. It seems like Luther might agree with that, at least in part. Or the Book of Concord would agree with that in part. On the other hand, there are those who, or let me scroll down a little bit. So too, those who boast of great learning or wisdom or power, prestige, family, honor, and trust in them as a god also. And I want to go back to this initial definition. If there's anything that you look to for all good and to which we find refuge in all need, you're looking at an idol. And I think a pretty easy test is if you see a significant problem in the world, what is your first response? Is your first response prayer? Is your first response devotion? Or is your first response arguing that the government should do something about it? Because if the arbiter of all good is the government, then you have made an idol of politics. Or if you see a problem and you're like, someone should fix that, so like Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, they should step in and fix that. Maybe you have a little bit of an idol of either wealth or celebrity or something like that. Or is your first instinct, let's start a petition on social media? Then you have, your idol is kind of everything that comes with that. So I think that's kind of getting at this same thing. When we think of an idol, who do you look to solve your problems? Where do you look for answers? Where do you look to for good, for the definition of what is good? And if it's not God, if it's not the Scriptures, then you have an idol in whatever area we're talking about. So that's what's kind of encompassed in this first commandment and in this explanation of the first commandment. As always, if you have comments or questions, you can go ahead and put them below. And regardless, brothers and sisters, go in peace, serve the Lord. Thanks be to God.